Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 37 of the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum, where we discuss all matters relating to the challenges and opportunities of live streaming worship services and other events of any faith, for any faith. If you're with us live, your questions and comments help to produce the show and steer the topics that we discuss. If you're live with us on YouTube or social media, get ready to, with a cell phone or a tablet, to capture a QR code that I'm going to put up in just a moment, because there are several ways that you can engage with us and watch and contribute to the show. So the first is by asking questions. You can write them in our custom Q&A platform, which is called Mukana. And I'm going to put a link into the Zoom chat right now for everyone to find that, as well as our Discord. And that's going to be important because I'm going to launch a couple of poll questions here today, and you'll need to be in Mukana to see them. The second way to engage is on our Discord. That's our private topic-driven resource and discussion platform. On it, you'll find a wealth of information that we've been building over the course of these 37 shows. And you'll find technical information, you'll find guidelines, you'll find ideas, you'll find all kinds of information, and the ability to discuss matters with other people in the Discord. So you can ask questions, you can get really good answers. It's a valuable resource. If you're with us live on Zoom, you can stick around after tonight's show and participate in our casual conversation post-show with open microphones. And if you'd like to participate on our panel in a future show, maybe you can offer a different perspective or your experience. Just get here 30 minutes before showtime and we'll check you in. And if you're hungry for more production-related communities like this one, for instance, office hours, the Zoom Test Kitchen, AV Tech Talks, they're some of my faves, and the Synagogue Tech Forum, which happens here on alternate Thursdays, is also a great resource. You can find links to that in our Discord under related shows. And on Mondays, we have an audio conversations meeting, a session, a casual thing at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. We mostly work on skills for mixing and listening and editing, but it's pretty casual and the conversation can cover any of the pressing issues that you may be having that week. So look for, you can visit this same Zoom meeting. The ID and password will work for the Monday session, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. So is this going to work? So I have a QR code here for people who aren't on Zoom. If you're on social media or YouTube, you can get to our Discord by scanning this QR code. That'll bring you right to the Discord. And I want to give you an opportunity to participate in tonight's show as well. All right. Now today's topic. Some people might have gotten the last show's email about wireless microphones. That happened 2 weeks ago, and today's topic is going to be about creating communities among tech teams. Right. So we think of our congregations as a community that provides many different kinds of support for its own members and for others, where community members support each other and the institution individually and in groups. We form committees, we volunteer, congregations help out members when they are experiencing adverse events in their lives. So let's, let me get to my poll questions here and launch the first one. All right. How many members in your congregation? I think that's a good place to start. So if you're in Mukana and you can see that, yeah, you can see that. Go ahead and answer that question. Under 100 people, 100 to 200, 200 to 300, more than 300 people. Let us know the size of your congregation. That would be the first question. And when you're ready, you can do that. And all right, now the second question I have to ask: how many people serve on your tech team? Are you the only one? Do you have 2 to 3 people, or more than four to 5 people, or more than that? Let us know. All right. And another question: how much time do you spend on tech for your congregation? Is it? Oh, that's the wrong question. All right, let's do this question. Do you have any community support outside of your team? Outside of your team, your church, what kind of community support do you have? Are there other people that you can talk to when you're trying to figure out how to do something, or what to buy, or how much to spend on something? Let us know what kind of community support that you might have built up over time. And on to the next question. How much time do you spend on tech for your organization, for your house of worship? Is it just on Sundays, a couple hours more on another day, spend several days a week? How much time do you spend? So, it occurs, I hear this a lot, that one of the least popular and difficult to recruit for teams or committees seems to be AV. And, why is that? Is it some people can be tech shy, or it can be intimidating, all those dials and buttons and switches and dials and things? Is it the learning curve? Is it a fear of failure because you might think there's a lot riding on the success of your church's web streaming of services? Is it because people don't have the time in their personal lives? In a typical congregation, there are very few people who have experience with audio and video production. So how does one learn, right? And production skills they're developed over time with experience and experimentation. There aren't really many places to actually learn this. There are, if you're young enough today, fortunately, the technology is such that a lot of high schools are offering classes in media production, which I think is great. Universities have some courses in media production, and then there are specialized schools. But other than that, how does one go about learning? You have to get your hands on equipment and have somebody help you to learn how to operate it and what the skills are beyond just operating the buttons and the dials. One of the most effective ways to learn is in groups and teams. When you're learning with a group of people all at the same time, you have that support system of all of those people together supporting each other and trying to learn. That's one of the bases for living at university is to have support groups of people at your own stage. And that's kind of where I want to steer the discussion to this evening, is creating groups of people, especially when you're, the only person there, or you have a very small team that's not much of a support system. So looking at some of the poll questions, I see there's 100 to 200 member congregations is prominent here. There are a few under 100. And tech teams are mostly 2 to 3 people. There's one that's only one person and one that has 5 or more. Congratulations. And how much time do you spend on tech each week? Several days each week on tech for the congregation is predominant. And a couple of people, one person said Sundays plus one other day, and somebody else said Sundays plus many hours on another day. And in terms of community support, 2 people have online community support from the Hybrid Ministries Forum or Office Hours or one of the others. Some people get their support from Facebook, and at least one person said that they know professionals in the field who they can talk to about this, and that's great. But how about widening the circle, right? How about widening the circle to other churches, other synagogues, other places of worship who all have smaller tech teams, and they have different sets of equipment, and they may be going about things a little bit differently. Wouldn't it be nice to compare notes, to visit each other, to get a tour of somebody else's facility and how that might work? So let's open up that discussion here. I'd like to hear from you, rather than you hearing from me, about how something like that might work, right? Let's get some discussion going. So if you have something that you'd like to offer, you can raise your digital hand, you can put something in Mukana, put a question in. Let's get some conversation going, because I'd really like to hear from you about some ideas. I have a couple ideas, but I'm going to, hold those for a little bit later on. Right? Elizabeth.
Thank you, Marty. Hello.
Hi.
I'm in the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Duluth, Minnesota. And we have our tech team is online and in service on Sunday mornings. We spend I'm the chairman of the board, and it's my job to find people to do the jobs. And right now we have a 4-person tech team with one person, and the 4 positions are what I call the lead. And then there's the sound guy and the video girl and the Zoom person. So there's 4 people that run it every Sunday. And one guy tells me, the main guy says he puts on 20 hours a week. And he is leaving at the end of March. And that means no one else knows how to do this. And so I don't know what's going to happen when we go online and in our service on April 1st. I'm not even slightly knowledgeable about tech. I can do a little bit as somebody shows me what to do. I don't know what to do. I can't find anyone that will sign up to do tech, because it takes this guy so many hours to do what he does. Anyway, I could go in more detail, but only if you want me to later or whatever. But we did visit another church to see how they were doing theirs, and they're doing the OBS, and it's all live streamed. What we have trouble with, I think, is that in order to do video and song, we have to do copyright, and we just haven't the time or the money and all that stuff to do that. So I'm being first here because I'm very, very frustrated, and I don't know what to do. That's enough for me for now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I feel your frustration, and I feel your fear, honestly. You're not certainly not alone in the limitations that you're facing, and you know the desire to add more people to your tech team, and the hesitancy that people have to do that. So let's thank you so much for that, and we'll address that. Let's get some more ideas, and see how we can help you and help everybody. Tim, how about you go next?
All right. Yeah, well, I've sort of been on both sides of it. I've actually been engaging with a couple of local churches for a little while now. And what I've tended to find quite a lot of is down here, because I'm based in Australia, so we're a bit more spread out sometimes than what we really should be. But I sort of found that the churches that I was visiting, that I had contacts within those churches anyway, we're all in the same boat. We're always looking for volunteers because there's not enough volunteers to do our services most of the time. But sort of from the church that I'm the head of tech for the church I go to. We've sort of found that we have a lot of band members that will start in the band, and then they suddenly realize that, oh, I can actually do words because I know the songs. Whereas I sort of started when the church started doing tech. I've always been there doing tech for them, and I don't know half these songs, and we get introduced to things that 20 minutes notice before a service. Oh yeah, by the way, we're doing a new song. I was like, that's great. I don't know the song. Hopefully whoever you've placed on lyrics this week actually knows that song. And when it comes to the question of, I forgot my train of thought. I'll finish that off later. Marty, you're on mute, I think.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. And let's go on to Jonathan. Hi.
Hello everybody. I hail from Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I started being a pianist in temples, in synagogues, like 15 years ago. And then when the pandemic hit, I was the most knowledgeable tech guy on my temple. So I've started doing really special stuff where we were playing from our homes, doing real-time, low-latency audio collaboration using software like Jamkasam and Sonobus. We did stuff that nobody else was doing. That was cool. And I've started learning. I have like a background in music production. In my high school, we had that kind of formation. And then I got nobody knew anything, and I knew a little thing, so I kept learning, and now I am assisting. Like, I am the health tech for my temple. We started live streaming with the pandemic, but I'm also the health tech in a temple in Washington State, and also I collaborate with a temple in Pasadena, California. These are temples where the main rabbi is Argentinian, so I had like some kind of links, and I helped them out. And we do pretty cool stuff, like we have musicians here in Buenos Aires playing for the musical service in Washington State with a multiple access service. So people that are there can see the musicians on screens, and the rabbi can sing over them, and all is transmitted to Zoom. So I do that kind of stuff, and I also like I am also head of volunteers for these communities, and Yeah, I had to learn a lot, and my main resource was Facebook groups for NDI and for OBS, and I had to do a lot with very little. I started like with 3 webcams, and then we got the NDI PTC camera, and now I use TeamViewer into their computer and move their camera and switch up their zoom and all kinds of. And I'm very tech lover.
And you're able to control them from Argentina?
Yes, exactly. I have
Ec-
this little studio, with all
Uh-huh.
the. I had to buy a good computer and some monitors, some graphics card, and yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, remote production is a really interesting way to think about what's possible. Sometimes, if you somebody can't make it into church on that particular day, they can do it from home if you're set up for it, and that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Keith, why don't you go next?
Okay. So for those who don't know who I am, I'm in a congregation about 2 miles from Marty's congregation. We've done business with them in the past and have been in negotiation about future business, which unfortunately has, for right now, fallen through because we're in a very tight budget situation. So before the pandemic, I was head of the sound team, and we did everything in the building. No internet. Just I, I, we had enough volunteers so that you had to volunteer for the sound team basically once a month. Sometimes one person, sometimes two. And then everything shut down. Sort of the sound team became the tech team and then became the multi-platform team. We keep changing things around a little bit. For instance, we had a sort of jury-rigged service that was partly done from inside our sanctuary just this past Sunday. This is the first time we've tried that. Although, as I'm sure Marty remembers well, we had one last July where we hired him and he came in and ran everything for us. Our situation is sort of continuously kind of confused because we don't know exactly what the roles are. And every time we try to change a little bit of what we're doing, the roles change a little bit. So the question about how many are on your tech team was a little bit hard to answer. I think we're a little bit lucky. We've got like 110, 120 people in our congregation, and we have a few with some technical background, luckily with different sorts of technical backgrounds. I don't understand Microsoft software at all. It's an ugly mystery to me. We have other people who do understand it, and they handle the computer stuff and the network stuff. I've got a technical background in math and physics, so I kind of understand the sound stuff, but I don't understand the video stuff. But we've got some other people who do understand the video stuff. So kind of in varying combinations, we sort of figure out what's necessary to do, and with a little arm twisting, we get probably about 4 people every service playing some kind of tech role, being the Zoom host, watching the waiting room, because we had a Zoom bombing attack in November. Now we have a waiting room, and when we have to let people in, that we know who they are. There's handling the chat and responding to it, switching people on and off. Again, it's a little vague, but it's about 4 people per group or per service. So yeah, we would like to get some more. I think all of us feel a little burned out. But on the other hand, we've got people like the board members that keep having to make big decisions, and they're more burned out than we are. And we've got some fairly major construction jobs that have to be done. And so the buildings and grounds people that are making those decisions are more burned out than we are. So I guess I kind of feel that as long as these people are doing bigger, harder jobs than me, I shouldn't complain too much about being burned out. But yeah, we could really use 2 or 3 more people within the congregation. But I think a lot of people sort of have this attitude that it's black magic, and that if you don't come in with the understanding, you're never going to be able to do it. And that's a hard barrier to get over. So maybe that's my biggest reason for being here this evening.
Well, thank you, Keith. Yeah, that's some pretty understandable realities that are very unfortunate. Hope you get through them well. I'm sure that you will. You have some really good people at your church who are dedicated, I know, and want to see it through. So what I've heard so far is the need for training resources, the opportunities for remote production, some help defining what some team member roles would be. And while it's nice to have a staff member being in charge, there are some financial realities that may not allow for that. I've been thinking that I can go out, I can be invited to a congregation to train a group of people on at least the basics of production work, in video and audio. Learning them effectively takes time, right? Can't dump a whole bunch of information on a group of people in 1 2 to 3 hour session and expect them to retain it all. When we're dealing with operating equipment, the best way to learn it is to jump in there and get your hands dirty, right? Try it, fail, try it again, figure it out, right? You don't want to do that during a service. You want to do that when you have the time to spend and the ability for it to not to work, frankly, right? Because it's all about practice. It's all about memory. It's about creativity, because there are multiple ways that you can accomplish something when it comes to audio and video production. And do I do it this way? Do I do it that way? Well, there are some nuances, and there will be differences. If you do it this way or that way, you may end up with a similar result doing it this way or that way, but how you get to that result may be a different process. Some may be simpler, some may be more complex. Sometimes is more of an automated thing, like you're trusting the equipment to do things on its own, and sometimes you want to retain more control. There are a few different ways to do things. Having an understanding of what those things are really helps, and that really depends on how well you understand the equipment, and that can be taught to a certain degree, but just like you can retain information from book learning, information is not necessarily knowledge. Knowledge of how to do something, physically being able to touch it and do it. So, but that can get expensive for me to come to a church, spend 2 or 3 hours over 3 or 4 or 5 sessions in order to really get people working properly. So had this idea, and it's not something that would be unique. I think it could be replicated elsewhere. And that idea is to get 3 or 4 different or 5 different congregations together in a collaborative community. And we could hold a monthly meeting, and each month we would meet at a different congregation, and everybody would be able to, that host congregation would give everybody a tour of their setup and their equipment and how they use it, and be able to show video clips of some of the services so that we can see what the results of their work is. And then we can hold a Q&A session with them. We could bring in somebody to talk about a particular training topic that we'll cover that day, whether it be audio or video or graphics or streaming. And so we all learn together, and we learn in a larger group than just one church, right? And by doing that and creating this community among multiple churches, and they don't have to be even in the same denomination, they could be, some churches tend to cluster together in the same neighborhood. There could be a UU church, a temple, a Christian church, whatever. How convenient to have that, that close geographical proximity with each other. And by clustering and making that community connection among tech teams from different places, you might find that you can lean on each other for support. If you have somebody who can't make it to service to do something that week, maybe you can call one of the other churches and see if there's somebody else might be willing to come in and help you out. And then you can share resources. And if you have a question about something that you're trying to do and can't quite figure it out, you have somebody else that you can call and maybe get together and work on something. Being able to share those resources can be a valuable thing in it. That's the benefit of community. So if you have a very small tech team in one church, there's only so much you can accomplish. But if you have 20 or 30 people in a pool, in a community of other churches, well, now you have more resources from which you can share. All right. So that's an idea that I've been working on. I might try to get that started within the Washington, D.C., Maryland area, see who's interested in forming that kind of community. But wherever you are, you can reach out to other churches, other synagogues, and try and pull people together. I'm sure that if you are feeling like you need additional support, you're probably not alone. That other churches are probably feeling the same thing and would welcome the opportunity to pool resources. All right. So, what do you think of that? How do you think that would go over in your community? Is that something that you think, if somebody approached you, how would you respond to that?
I think it'd be very welcome. In fact, I had the same discussion with another person in another church probably about 3 weeks ago. I'm lucky enough that we're part of there's a Love Inc., which is meant to mobilize churches in a community. And we're part of that partnership, which is 16 churches in our local area across 7 denominations. So I approached them and said, I'd be willing to get something similar to what you're talking about started in our area. So
Well, that's great. Yeah, interfaith communities is a great place to start. You know, a lot of locations have these interfaith communities that are sometimes initiated by county or state government, local government, to try and pull churches together. That would be a great place to start. And just otherwise, just making phone calls. You know, I'm sure you know people at other churches. That would be great. And if you were looking for somebody to help you kick it off, I'd be happy to talk about that, to possibly facilitate meetings remotely, right? Because that's what it's all about these days is virtual services, virtual production, or remote production, meetings and other things. We can bring in experts to talk about certain topics and do training on even specific pieces of equipment from anywhere, right? I'm sure that Jonathan would be, willing to entertain a request to show us how he's doing remote production, from Argentina, and doing remote production of synagogues in California and other places in the United States. And we've had some demonstrations here on the Hybrid Tech Forum of Leo in the UK is controlling a temple in it was Mark, one of our earlier panelists, is controlling a temple in Alaska, right? Geography has no bounds when it comes to the internet, or very few anyway. So if anybody has any other thoughts about that, I'd be curious and happy to hear them. John.
Just a little suggestion I would recommend, and I haven't had any benefit from this, but I actually work in a school who we actually have a small tech team that we train the students on how to use the equipment, and then we actually, because we're a Christian school, we encourage them to go to their local church and say to them, "I've got this skill. Can I join the tech team as like a junior?" And then it works both ways. So not is the church getting the benefit from having another volunteer there, but they've also got someone that they can train up if they need to get to the next point, the next level, because we can only take them so far in the schooling environment. There's only so many live shows that we can actually put them on to get them trained up on everything. But then I've had quite a few that have gone off to their local church and done that. And then their churches now benefit. They've now got a new pro presenter operator, or they've got a assistant sound operator, or so.
That's an excellent idea. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, some high schools have media production classes, and boy, what a resource, because they have probably a limited set of equipment there, or maybe they're fortunate enough to have a fabulous set of equipment there, but they only get so much time on that gear, and students would love the opportunity to put it to actual use, right? So yeah, that's a resource that's certainly worth tapping into, and universities as well. And if you have a university nearby that's got a media production department, tap into that. It's university students would really appreciate the opportunity to do some actual work and, maybe get a little bit of money for it. So that's a great idea. John Isham.
Hi, everybody. Nice meeting you all and listening to all the good ideas today. A little story behind our little church. We have a small church in Bradenton, Florida, called the Manatee Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Our congregation is about 70. And at the time COVID hit, and we had to close our doors, we had to learn how to do Zoom services. And over the last 2 years, we have become quite adept at that in preparing a PowerPoint service, along with interjecting people who are members of doing things like chalice lighting and benedictions and things like that that take part of the service. And we've become quite proficient at that. But we're reaching a point now where we're going to go live again. And we are in the process, as Marty knows, I'm in the process of trying to come up with a configuration of what's the best setup for us to start. And I'm about to let a contract to a local vendor, probably having 2 or 3 PZT cameras and a Blackmagic controller as the fundamental devices. I'm a little bit in anticipation of what it is we really need. I was interested in Jonathan's statement about his use of NDI. I have been convinced that SDI is the best way to go by my local people here, and I wanted to question that, but we've also got to get going, and that's the deal. We also are limited on tech people. We have myself and another fellow who are basically handling all of it. I like the idea. We do have a local university here that we might be able to hit their media production department, and maybe I like the idea of hiring somebody. They're looking to create a request to hire somebody to come in, maybe spend 15 to 20 hours a week to handle some of the pre-production stuff. But anyway, I really appreciate all the comments and what people have to say. We are all facing the same thing. We also have a few local churches that we might be able to team up with in what Marty is talking about, getting the groups together and discussing their problems. So thanks, Marty, for setting this up and getting this going. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I apologize that my mug has been full frame all this time while other people were talking. Thank you for letting me know. Keith, why don't you go next?
Yeah, first of all, on the question about forming some sort of organization of nearby congregations, yeah, I think I personally at least would be interested in that. And I would guess probably maybe 3 to 4 other people in the congregation would probably participate, at least some. And we've also occasionally brought up this other idea that was mentioned of involving young people. We have something like 10 to 12 young people playing some role in the congregation, some of them quite young. And occasionally the topic has been raised of, take someone that's junior high school or high school age and, have them be a junior member of the tech team. I know I would have jumped at a chance like that when I was that age. And I think we probably have a few kids that would do that now. For whatever reason, I think it's probably just because something else is always more important. We haven't done that yet, partly because the roles keep changing, and I think we'd like to have things be a little more stable before we bring in a young person. And there's also the issue, you know, young people and expensive equipment are sometimes tempted to do foolish things. And I don't quite know how you get to the, I don't work with the kids myself. That's not where my strengths are. But I would think it would be a difficult decision, you know, just how much responsibility are you going to give someone who's, say, 15 years old? Because again, when I was that age, I'd be tempted to do some kind of stupid stuff with the equipment, especially say if friends of mine were also around. So I'd be interested in anybody's thoughts on that question.
Well, if it's any use, I've been able to teach 12-year-olds how to run audio for a service. A service that actually, had a fair amount of music performance involved in it. So they, over the course of a summertime, they came in on a weekly basis, and by the end of the summer, I was able to, this was pre-COVID, able to sit them down at the board, and they ran the entire service from beginning to end.
It's impressive.
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable. She actually, and then this was a 12-year-old girl. She actually ran at least 2 services entirely on her own. Right. So that was audio. And while I wouldn't have left that person or any of the young people unsupervised, right? We always want to support them, and we don't want to make them feel like they have no backup. We want to have somebody there to back them up. They became quite proficient at it, and they were eager to learn and really appreciated it. There are other teenagers who are involved in the theater department at their schools, and some of them run tech, video, and audio for theater performances at schools. So offering them the opportunity to learn a different set of equipment can be valuable, and they might be interested. I know, any number of people who learned how to do tech in church as a younger person and then went on to careers in media production, right? They got their feet wet and their training, or their low-level training, their introduction in church. And then just like there are so many famous musicians and singers, who got their start singing in choir in church and went on to do solos and then went on to careers. There are people have started doing tech that way as well. So, it's not something to sneeze at. The opportunity to really dive in and get involved in some place that has fairly low criteria and fairly low level of risk of failure, right, is really, really valuable. It's a great place to get started.
Thanks.
And sometimes you'll find people that may be shy or hesitant to volunteer or get started, but once they do and they dive in, they find that, wow, this is pretty cool. Last week's show, the Synagogue Tech Forum, it was an interesting case study of a temple in Atlanta, Georgia, who was planning to do a major audio-video upgrade in a fairly large temple. And as part of their planning process, they went and visited a megachurch not far from them. And, you know, as you can imagine, mega churches spend tons and tons of money on their infrastructure, on their audio and video and streaming infrastructure. I mean, to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. And, you know, and I've been in a few of those, and I've talked to a few of those team leaders. I find that, you know, while churches who don't have even 1/10 of that to spend might not even think about spending that kind of money, even if they had it, right? Because we're not putting on a show. This is not Broadway, right? This is not a concert. Those churches who spend that kind of money don't do it because they have the money. They, you know, yep, some of them do it because they really want to put on high production value with effects and lighting cues and smoke and mirrors and, you know, make it look flashy and make it look very entertainment. And for a lot of people that works because they have a lot of members and that's how they can afford it. A surprising number, and this was discussed last week, they do it because it's important for the membership to get a feeling of intimacy and personalization during the service. When you have a large sanctuary and you're sitting in the back, you can't really see the chancel very well. You can't make out facial expressions. You can, you know, have limited view. You can't see everything that's going on. When there are youth pageants going on, especially with the little kids, you know, it's really hard to see them. And even in smaller rooms, if the rooms aren't configured with a raised stage, you know, I know a bunch of congregations who do that on the floor, right? Kids are seated down on the floor and you can't see them from anywhere but the front row, right? So having video screens show that with fairly tight shots or medium shots, everybody in the sanctuary can see, right? And when you have somebody who is operating cameras and operating your switcher and knows how to capture video images of the moment in an effective way, then everybody in the sanctuary and everybody at home gets a much better sense of what's going on and gets a much more intimate feeling and really gets to feel more involved and closer to the service that's being presented and conducted, right? The audio is good. You can hear every word. You can see what's going on. You can see various views, and the pictures are relevant to what's happening at the moment. And to do that, you've got to have a fair number of cameras. You've got to have microphones. They've got to be in the right places. You have to have a mixer big enough to handle all those microphones, a switcher big enough to handle all those cameras. The cameras have to be in the right places. They have to have the right lenses to zoom in and out properly. You know, it takes a fair amount of money to do that. And that's why those large churches spend that kind of money. They have to have the lighting that's effective for those cameras to look really good. So where I was going with this is that these are opportunities to learn things that might not be intuitive to people in the congregation who have been put in charge of planning and budgeting and resources and training and such. You know, if you aren't aware, if you don't have that kind of experience, these are aspects of planning that you might not be familiar with, might not be intuitive. You know, I know too many congregations, tech people in congregations who have said, I got one camera in the back of the room, that's all I need. Well, okay, if that's all you need, that's fine, but I would disagree. You know, you could be serving your congregation and generating more interest and producing a much more interesting and engaging presentation of your service doing it differently. So if you have that group of people around you and visiting those larger churches and churches with more experience, churches, synagogues, congregations, then you have a larger group of people that you can learn from. All right, so we're coming up on 8 o'clock. And usually the show, we have a conversation that runs for about an hour and a half or 90 minutes. I see there's some new people who have just recently joined us. Welcome. And we are talking about creating community among different churches, tech people amongst different churches, being able to commune with and learn from each other, mutual support. All right. So I do have one question from Tim Mann in Melbourne. How many groups share their location? We're renting at a school that provides most of our equipment. All right. How many are there? Some smaller congregations, and I know congregations that are not so small, they just don't have their own property, and they rent space from in schools and in other churches. And in some cases, those facilities can provide some equipment. In other cases, the congregation has to provide their own equipment and then set it up every morning and tear it down in the afternoon and then have a place to store it. They do that every single week. And that takes time to set up and to tear down and to transport. And it can be quite a thing, but they do it and they do it well. In some cases, it's not an ideal situation. Some of the rooms that these congregations are renting in these facilities, they may be gymnasiums with entirely hard walls. I mean, imagine trying to set up a PA system for a church service in a basketball stadium. Can be an acoustic challenge, right? So is anybody else sharing facilities? Have you been to any services where people are sharing facilities? I know that there's an interfaith congregation here in Maryland that doesn't have their own facilities, so they rent at the Jewish Services Organization in Rockville. And then they have actually rent sanctuary space in other churches for High Holy Days. I know they were at the Silver Spring Church for quite a few years for High Holy Days. And for those services, the church actually provided not only the equipment, but people to run it. And so in that way, the renting church didn't have to worry about tech at all. They just told us what they needed, and we provided all the equipment, we provided the setup, we provided the people to run it, and they were really happy with that, and they were willing to pay for it. David Powell, hi.
Hi, yes. We're not regularly in a borrowed space, but actually my very first Zoom experience was as a Zoom provider in a church that we needed to borrow. And I guess what I was hearing you saying was what our experience was. Sound is the big thing. You can have a single, as we did, a single telephone, smartphone on a tripod, and if your mobile data is good enough, you get a signal out. But I hadn't realised that they actually had a soundboard there, and a minister who was interested in our event, who belonged to the place, we could have benefited from their soundboard, but we didn't ask enough questions. We didn't have enough of a conversation with enough people before the event to optimize the experience.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting, because for many years, the church that I was at had a sound system, but their policy was not to let anybody else use it. So renters had to bring in their own sound system, right? Whereas the church's sound system sat there idle. And I said, we have a perfectly good sound system, and we have people who know how to use it. And we can be charging extra for the use of that sound system, and people will pay that, because they are then relieved of the responsibility of bringing in their own and having their people operate it. And why don't we try that? And we did, and we did a little bit of research, and we determined a pricing schedule for what we would charge. And not to my surprise, but to others, they were very happy to be relieved of that responsibility and have all their tech needs taken care of for them, right? Now, the church had to make sure that their tech people were willing to do that, to spend the time, and they were paid as well. The tech people who ran these rental services, they were paid, right? We made sure they were taken care of. And that worked out quite well for everybody. And it made quite a bit of money for the church, extra money. So they were happy with that too. All right. So we did have one question from last show about wireless microphones. First, let me see if anybody has anything else that they'd like to share, to add, or to ask about community. Please go ahead. Jonathan, hi.
Hello. Yeah, just a little thing. In my community, when the high holidays approach, we do lease a bigger place, much bigger place, like for 6,000-7,000 people, where the regular temple has a capacity for 500, I think. And it used to be the case that the only live streaming happening was during the high holidays in this big upscale place. And we had like pro AV techs running the whole show. But now we have gotten better with the live streaming, and it has gotten like a more like a common thing. So now we live stream every week from the regular temple. That's something that has changed quite a bit. If I may just add a little thing about this sharing between communities. In Argentina, we have like a WhatsApp group that used to be a Facebook group for all the organists and Hassan, like singers on the temples. And we started sharing a lot of tech information during the pandemic, and that led to a lot of great things. But you can share things between equals. But when it comes time to ask for information from the pros that works at each temple, of course it's harder because it's their job and it's not as easy to get good info. You have to become one of them for them to accept you and give you info, and it has to be a trade. And I guess that's okay. That's all right. never expects anybody to give something away for free, but yeah, that in order to get help, you sometimes you either need to pay or to level up to be at a level where you can share info and not just get info. So that's why I needed to learn a lot to be able to contribute, so I could benefit from others. That's how I learned at the end. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. Sorry.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And yeah, so that's really interesting. There are communities that you can find that are online. So our community right here and our Discord in particular. I do participate in several Facebook groups that are dedicated to technology in congregations. There's a lot of really good information and good people who are sharing information there. But then there are people who are a little less appropriate, shall we say. Have a higher opinion of their abilities than might be regarded by professionals. And it's sometimes difficult to distinguish who knows what they're talking about and who really shouldn't be sharing what they shouldn't be sharing. And that was one of the reasons that we have our Discord, is because it is, you know who you're talking to other people in our community. We had, since COVID started lifting in a bunch of places, our regular panel, we started this show with about 8 panelists that came on a regular basis, and they were vetted by me. They were all professionals. They were audio professionals. They were automation designers. They were music directors. They're, contractors, integrators, all kinds of really good people. And they're still around, but they've, gotten very busy with work. So it's harder for them to get here. But everybody is still on the Discord. And as I said at the beginning of the show, we started building a database of information on the Discord all throughout the show. So it's been 35 weeks now, 37 weeks. And you'll find a really good set of information. It's all categorized by topic and interests. So it's easy to find things. And if you get stuck on something, you have a question, you're looking for information, post something there. You can also direct message people if you want to contact somebody privately. So it's a great resource. And then there are the other shows that I mentioned early in the show that are, similar sets of communities. There's some overlap. Some people are members of, multiple communities. So office hours, AV Tech Talks, the Zoom Test Kitchen, and there are some others that deal with audio, with video, with streaming. Really, really good resources. But there's nothing like getting together personally in small groups. Elizabeth.
Thank you. How do I find what you were just talking about? This is places on the internet that we can go and look at groups?
Yes. So when you registered for the Zoom call, in your confirmation email, there was a registration for the Discord. I also put that in the chat at the beginning of the show, in the Zoom chat here at the beginning of the show, the registration for our Discord. And I'll do that one more time. Let me just scroll up and get this.
It's called Discord?
So Discord is a platform. Discord is a platform that has, it's kind of like think of it, I'll just illustrate it like Facebook, and Facebook has a whole bunch of different groups, right?
Yeah.
So Discord is a offline, well, it's not on, it's a different platform. And in addition, rather than groups, there are what they call servers. So there are manufacturers, there are gamers, there are interest groups, and everybody has their own server. So the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum has our server, and when you register, you will get to our server. In our server, in our Discord, which is how I refer to it as our Discord, you will find categories of information and topics under categories. So you can scroll through and see things there, and you can post information, you can post questions, you can download stuff, you can upload stuff. If you have any difficulties, you can always contact me directly. So it's a really good place to be.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And one of the topics, one of the categories is, so there's a general channels category, and then there's a topic under that called related shows. And in there, you'll find links to some of these other internet shows, Zoom shows that happen. You can find them in there. Like perhaps the granddaddy of them all, the biggest one is called Office Hours. That happens every single day of the year. They have just passed 700 days of continuous days of shows. And they talk about anything and everything to do with media production. And these are high-level people who are willing to answer any question you want to pose at them. They have a 99% answering rate. And they will answer 100 shows a day within a two-hour show. And it's really interesting. The first hour of the show is general Q&A. Ask anything, you'll get all kinds of great answers. The second hour is generally dedicated to a topic that they dive into on a deeper basis. So today's second hour, for example, was about the future of online concerts for artists. Fascinating subject. Right? I do want to get to a question from last week's show, or last show's, it's 2 weeks ago, from Tim Ware, who is here tonight. This is about wireless microphones that we covered last week. Last show, it was, before and after you buy a wireless microphone, you need to understand that it is a miniature broadcasting radio station. And it operates within the same radio spectrum that broadcast radio and television operate in. And you're operating in the same radio frequency spectrum that every other wireless microphone and several other devices work on, right? And only one transmitter can operate on a single frequency at the same time. If you have 6 wireless microphones, that's 6 different frequencies that you need to be operating on that nobody else in your area is operating on. Because if there's more than one transmitter, that's causing interference and noise and all kinds of things. So you have to be aware of all of that. And when you buy a wireless microphone, you buy it where it has a certain range of frequencies available that it can operate on. And you can buy them in different ranges. So you need to pick a range where you have the best opportunity to find frequencies that are available to you. So we went through all of that and more on the last show. We had a special guest, an expert, take us through that. So Tom's question is, I use a couple of fairly new Shure wireless microphones. They basically work fine, but sometimes one or another will start dropping out during a service. The batteries are fresh and the distance is not that far. So looking for suggestions. So when you have multiple wireless microphones and the transmitters and the receivers are not that far apart because they do have a limited range, and you're getting noises or dropouts, then there are a few things that we'll look at. The first is the receiving antenna. Where is the antenna? Does it have line of sight to where the transmitters are? Or is it inside another room? Or is it inside of a metal rack? Does it have metal around it or anywhere near it? If the transmitters and the receiving antennas have line of sight to each other, no obstructions, and there's no metal around the receivers, that's a good situation. If you don't have that, that's what you want to try and arrange. So once that question has been resolved and removed, then we look at interfering traffic on your radio spectrum. So as I said, every transmitter has to be operating on a specific frequency that there's no other traffic on. And that's part A. Part B is that when you have multiple transmitters operating on, let's take two transmitters operating on two different frequencies, and let's put them this far apart, right? They can interact with each other in such a way that kind of like musical notes, right? If you have one note on a guitar string and you have another note on a guitar string, and you listen really carefully, and you can hear this on piano and other instruments, those two notes can produce other notes. They call them sympathetic notes or resonant notes, right? In some other circles, we call them they're in radio and ham radio, there's another term for it. You take note A, you take note B, the specific frequencies, you add them together, and you'll get a note out here, right? And if you subtract them from one another, you'll get another note out here, right? They'll be at a lower level, but they're there. Now, those are called intermodulation distortions. Now, if you have a third transmitter that is operating on one of those frequencies, then you'll have some problems. So these are all things that need to be calculated and configured. Fortunately, most wireless systems today include the ability to scan the radio spectrum for usable frequencies. And you want to use them in the proper way. So there's a process to use them with. And that process is very simple. You do a scan for your first transmitter, right? You assign that transmitter to that frequency that the receiver tells you is a good frequency. You turn that transmitter on, you leave it on. Then you do another scan, and that will be the frequency for your second transmitter. Assign that frequency to that transmitter. You leave both of those on and not close to each other. You want to have about 2 feet of distance between them. Put them down somewhere and not real close to the receiver. So you want to have at least 6 feet of distance between them. You do a third scan. That becomes the frequency for your third receiver. You leave that one on, put that down somewhere, and so on. The reason is you want to have those first few transmitters working so that when the receiver does the next scan, it will find those interfering, those phantom frequencies, right? So now you have all these frequencies that have been searched and scanned that are working all together and not interfering with each other. And a lot of times these systems will allow you to choose not just the frequency, but a block or a band. So there'll be, when you look at the transmitter or the receiver, you may not see the actual frequency number, but you'll see a block and a channel. There'll be two other numbers. A block is a small section of the total range that the receiver can work at. So you have that smaller range, and within that range are the channels, and they could be numbered channels, like 1 through 7 or something like that, right? So if you have that sort of system, you want to try and get all of your transmitters working within the same block or same band. If you put them in separate bands within the same receiver, they may not calculate properly. All right. So I hope that answers that question, Tom. I hope that gives you something that you can go on. All right. Anybody else have any questions? Anything at all? Open topic. Challenge me. Go ahead. I dare you. In 2 weeks, we're going to do a case study of our own. We're going to have a church in, let me find it now, in Glasgow, Ireland, in the UK. He's going to, they're going to show us some pretty remarkable things that they've accomplished to simplify their operation using automation devices like the Stream Deck, right? Where they've been able to program fairly simple buttons on the Stream Deck to do multiple functions, you know, like a macro. You push one button, 6 things happen, right? So that's going to be really interesting. He shared some of that information with me, and I was quite impressed. So that'll be a really good show. Interesting case study. And next week on the Synagogue Tech Forum, they're covering a topic. Let's see, how did they say it? It is tactile to fill-in tech, how one community merged to fill-in and tech. So those of you in the know will know what that means. But it'll be interesting to see what they're doing. So these case studies are always interesting. It's part of what I'm referring to by visiting different churches, different synagogues, seeing what they're doing, how they're doing it. These case studies are very close to that. And it's always interesting. We've done several case studies so far here in the Tech Forum. We did early on in the series. We did our needs assessment programs, where the panelists did a needs assessment of 3 different congregations, small, medium, and large, where they were just starting to think about doing their upgrades. And we asked them a whole series of questions, and we gave them a whole bunch of feedback and recommendations on things that they should be thinking about, ways that they would go, recommendations that we made for how many cameras, where to put them, whether they needed to upgrade their sound mixer, what kind of sound mixer, loudspeakers, wiring, how to operate things, where to put them. We did all of that. And then after making those recommendations, we went back a few months later and we did a case study to see what their progress was and whether they followed the advice that we had given them or went a different way. All good. Their success, is the important thing that we were trying to get to. Whether they followed our recommendations or somebody else's recommendations, we just wanted to see how they were doing. All right. Great. At this time, I am going to end the live stream. We're going to say goodnight. I do want to thank everybody for coming. And I want to thank the DVE store for their support. That gives us our wonderful true high definition Zoom account. And I want to thank the Office Hours crew for the use of Mukana. That is a Q&A and polling platform that they developed in Office Hours. And it does so much more. That's what we're using it for. Everybody join the Discord and participate in our community. And thank you so much. We'll be around if you